Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about signs that you are in the right relationship for you, or a relationship that might be the right one for you, and things that might be some warning signs. If you're new here, I'm Jessica. I'm a licensed counselor and private practice owner. And actually, one of my specialties as a therapist is relationships. So I have special training in family therapy, couples counseling, and I love working with clients in individual therapy on how to improve their relationships or how to increase their ability to have healthy relationships. So today is just the tip of the iceberg on information that I could give about relationships. So stay tuned and let's get into it. So before we get started, I do have notes because it's kind of a lot. So if you see me kind of looking down, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my notes. So I wanted to kind of have this be more casual and not do a ton of editing, just kind of talk to you because that works better for me. Not that necessarily that I don't want to be editing, but I want to have it feel like a casual conversation, kind of like I do with clients. So before we get into it, just want to say, again, I'm a therapist, I'm a relationship expert, but I'm not your therapist, I'm not your relationship expert. So if any of these kind of hit a nerve with you, I would say go talk to a professional about it. So the first sign that you are in the right relationship for you is that you know where you stand with the other person. So this one is huge, especially in the beginning. A lot of times we get into this like game playing where it's like, I'm gonna wait until they text me, or I'm gonna wait a couple hours before I respond to their text because they waited a couple hours to respond to my text. Or I'm not gonna ask them to hang out this weekend because they haven't asked me to hang out this weekend. If we're playing those games, like, it's not a great sign. I know it's like really, really common to do that. And we're going to talk about why at the end of this video, why we do that. But if you don't know where you stand with the person, if you are unsure of how they feel about you, like, that's just not a good sign. So, and what I wanted to talk about too is like, you should know basically when you're going to be having plans with them again, well in advance. Do not waste your time on somebody who is making you wait till the last minute to make plans. If they value you, they are going to make sure that they have plans lined up with you well in advance. So if you find yourself kind of waiting by the phone, it's getting closer to the weekend, you're not making plans with your friends because you want to make sure your weekend is clear for that person, that's not great. We don't want to do that because that's how we start alienating our friends. If this person values you, they are going to ask you to spend time with them a couple days before the weekend. They're not going to keep you waiting. So that's an important one. You know where you stand with the person. So that includes kind of knowing that they're into you and knowing that they want to hang out with you. Number 2, the second sign that your relationship is headed in the right direction, that this might be the right relationship for you, is that you're not fighting all the time. This seems simple, but you'd be surprised, especially in the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase is those first couple of months into your relationship. If you're fighting all the time, that's not great, because the honeymoon phase is supposed to be a time when you're excited to see each other. You don't have much to fight about because you're still learning about one another. You're just excited to spend time together, and basically nothing that the other person does annoys you yet. So if you find that you're arguing all the time during the honeymoon phase, things aren't going to get easier the longer you get into a relationship. Things get more difficult the farther you get into a relationship. So sometimes we think like, oh, I just need to get through this period and then things will get better. It's like, no, if you're in those first few months of a relationship and you find that you're fighting more times than you're not, it's probably time to call it. So the way that I think about this, and I use this kind of saying a lot, is the 80-20 rule. So are you feeling good in the relationship? Are you guys not fighting 80% of the time? And then maybe 20% you're having some little spats, or you're kind of feeling unsure about the relationship? Then that's an okay place to be in to kind of stick it out and see where the relationship goes. 80-20, okay? You need to be feeling good at least 80% of the time, and be honest with yourself, because sometimes we, in those beginning phases, just speed right past these warning signs, speed right past these red flags. So you need to be honest with yourself. How often am I feeling good when I'm with this person? Am I feeling good in this relationship? And how often am I feeling crappy? The third sign of a good relationship is again going back to that honeymoon phase, and it's that they are not love bombing you. You may have heard this term before, but if you haven't, it's basically like somebody in the beginning who just love bombs you. They say, I love you really quickly, like within a few days or a week, or they're just showering you with gifts and telling you're the best person ever and they love you so much. And like some of those things are good, right? Like when we're in the beginning phases of a relationship, they should think most of what we're doing is amazing. They should be kind of obsessed with us, but not in a way where it's like, I love you, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with you within the first few days, first few weeks. That can be a huge warning sign for people who have narcissistic traits or who have just struggle in relationships because they're kind of doing everything they can to keep you really close. And they want to make you feel really secure right away. So then you might just start to ignore warning signs later on. So this topic of love bombing, we could get into for like literally a whole 20-30 minute video. So if you guys want to know more about love bombing, hit the like button or comment and say you want me to do a video on that, and I will. So yeah, that's a huge one. But if they are not love bombing you, that's a good sign that your relationship is possibly a good one. And yeah, the other thing I was gonna say about love bombing is like sustainable. A lot of times we think like, oh, right away in relationships, we have to feel this passion and this huge spark and like be so excited about them. And honestly, the more sustainable relationships, so the relationships that last the longest are the ones that are kind of a slow burn. The ones where we're taking our time at the beginning to see how we feel about that person, to get to know them before we're like, oh yeah, I do love this person, huh? Like we let our feelings bloom rather than just diving right in. So more sustainable relationships are the slow burn. The fourth sign that your relationship is probably a healthy one is that when you bring up your feelings, thoughts or feelings that are concerns about the relationship or concerns about other things, they don't minimize your feelings and they don't gaslight you. So again, gaslighting is a huge term right now, and a lot of times I see it on TV being misused. I love reality TV, so which is my guilty pleasure. Not so guilty, I love it. But they will say like, oh, that person's gaslighting me. And I'm like, nope, that's not what gaslighting is. So basically what gaslighting is when you, and this is like a very simplistic way of explaining it. Again, I could do a whole video on gaslighting, so let me know if you're interested in that, but I feel like there's been a lot of people talking about it already. But basically gaslighting is when you're like, hey, I saw you kind of being inappropriate with that other person when we were hanging out. Like you were getting a little bit too cozy with them, and that made me feel uncomfortable. And they say something like, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? We're just friends. Why are you always acting crazy? Things like that, where they try to poke holes in your sense of reality, if that makes sense, right? Where like you're seeing something and maybe like them having a relationship, like being cozy with somebody else was something that you were perceiving through your emotions, because sometimes our emotions do distort situations. But then they should be willing to have a conversation with you. They shouldn't be like belittling you, saying you're crazy, why do you feel that way? They should be like, oh, I'm so sorry that you felt that way, let's talk about this. So again, the fourth sign is that they're not minimizing or gaslighting when you're bringing up concerns. So if you find that you are holding back concerns or holding back your thoughts and feelings about anything, positive thoughts and feelings, negative thoughts and feelings, if you find yourself holding them back, I want you to ask yourself, is this because I've tried to bring up thoughts and feelings to them in the past and they've minimized it or made me feel bad about it or made me feel crazy? Or is it my own fear of vulnerability? Because those are two separate things, right? Where it's like sometimes we hold back because we've had bad experiences in past relationships, or we were just raised in a way where we don't talk about our feelings. That could be a thing that you need to cope with and work through. But also ask yourself, is it because I've brought things up to them and they made me feel bad about it? The fifth sign that your relationship could be a healthy one, could be the right one for you, is that when you do argue, there are not low blows happening. Okay, so this is a big one. A lot of times we think like, oh, we shouldn't argue at all. That's just not true. We're going to argue in relationships. Arguments are healthy because they help us work out issues, right? Like there are going to be issues in every single relationship. And if we're not talking about them, that's not healthy. So arguments are gonna come up. But what you need to be asking and looking at is, are we fighting fair? So not fighting fair is like, You would be cussing at each other or calling each other names or just saying really nasty things to each other in the heat of the moment. Things that are said in anger are remembered, okay? So we all get heated, we all say things we regret, but if low blows are consistently happening either from your partner or from you or between both of you, that's not a good sign, because remember, the further we get into relationships, oftentimes the more difficult it becomes, not easier. So if we are in the beginning stages of a relationship and we're having low blows when we fight, that is not a good sign that this relationship is going to be sustainable in the future. And another thing with that is that the number one relationship ender is resentment, okay? There's a relationship theorist or therapist, his name is Gottman, his last name is Gottman, and he has done studies and looked at resentment a lot and has shown that the number one thing that ends relationships is resentments, things that we hold inside and we're not able to let go, okay? So when we do low blows in fights, what does that become? Resentments. If my partner says something really mean to me and then the argument's over, I'm still gonna be thinking about that. I'm still gonna be upset about it. So when resentments happen in your relationship, again, it doesn't mean your relationship's automatically gonna end or it's not the relationship you should be in. It means you need to try to work through those resentments. Sometimes we can get through them and let them go, and other times we can't. But that's just why we want to avoid low blows at any cost. Well, not any cost, but like we just want to really try to avoid low blows because those things are remembered. And then they become resentments, and then resentments become contempt. Again, I could get into each one of these numbers in a whole other video. So if you're liking this video, make sure you subscribe, like, stick around. I'm a relationship expert, so I'm going to be doing a lot of relationship videos. So yeah. The last one, and number 6, is that your attachment styles are at odds. So I'm going to briefly go into attachment because I'm definitely going to do a whole video on this because it deserves a video or more. But basically we have attachment styles during childhood, and then we have attachment styles during adulthood. And attachment styles are dictated by our relationship to our caregiver growing up, our relationship to our peers during our formative years, the relationship we witnessed between our caregivers, so if our parents were married or got divorced, the interactions we witnessed between them, and then the relationships through our life dictate our attachment. And attachment is on a spectrum. So there's avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, secure is in the middle, and then there's anxious avoidant kind of floating in there. And it's on a spectrum, right? So like you can be a little bit anxious, or like maybe certain people trigger your anxious attachment, and you could be a little bit avoidant, or certain people trigger your avoidance. But basically, if you are, let's say, an anxious attachment and your partner is avoidant, anxious and avoidant attachment styles don't go well together. I'm not saying that you can't work in a relationship, but they just don't go well together because they're constantly triggering one another. Avoidant people are triggering anxious people to feel more anxious because avoidant people pull away, and people with anxious attachments get really anxious when people pull away from them. And anxious people are triggering avoidant people to be more avoidant because avoidant people get more avoidant when people go towards them. Both people who are anxious and avoidant are both scared of rejection or abandonment. This could be a conscious fear or an unconscious fear, but they're both scared of the same thing. They just express it in different ways. So avoidant people do what's called deactivating, and anxious people do what's called activating. So again, I'm going to talk about this in a video, and I'll talk about how to figure out what your attachment is, because it's actually kind of simple, and where to find resources to manage your triggers if you are anxious or avoidant and this is negatively impacting your relationship. So again, if this is a video that you want like really soon, leave me a message so I know that and I can get on it. Okay, so I kind of zoomed through those, but again, those were 6 signs that your relationship might be the right one for you. Again, this is not prescriptive. I am a relationship therapist, but I'm not your therapist. But let me know if you disagree with any of these. Like if you're like, oh, this happened in my relationship, but like we ended up getting married and we have a great relationship, because I would love to hear that. And also like every situation is so individual, right? So like I don't know your situation, so some of these might not apply to you. So I would love to hear from you guys in the comment, like ones you agree with or disagree with, or if you have any questions, I can answer those for you the best to my ability. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you on the next one.